I suspect that Republicans leaked it in order to embarrass Pelosi because they love this. They love that Pelosi comment. It's a free market.
It is a ridiculous comment. I am a supporter of the free market. I am very pro-free market, but it is not. The government can do the tinkering and setting of the rules under which the free market operates. So they should not, like the referee should not participate in the game. Is like what we're saying here. So I would probably be all for I would sooner just get rid of Congress. But if we have Congress setting these kinds of rules, they should not benefit from the rules they're making.
That's a perfect analogy. Should the umpire be able to bet on the baseball game?
And that's what she said. Oh, no, this is a country that... And she basically said, well, this country loves baseball, so of course they should be able to.
It's a free country.
Well, no, that's not saying anything about baseball. So
that would be, to me, far worse than what Pete Rose did. Because Pete Rose, when he gambled on baseball, and he made this point in his own defense, he said, I only ever bet for my team. Which, honestly, that kind of feels fine.
Right.
What's it going to do? Make you try harder to win? It should be illegal to bet against your own team.
Right.
But if you're the umpire and you have some say, that's why it was such a scandal that the Federal Reserve Board of Governors were trading they weren't trading stocks, but they were trading major index funds, which is just as bad because they move the index funds, just with their whispering to the market. And so the Fed, to its credit, has said, okay, you're not doing any of this. No index funds, nothing, you're not trading at all, period, done. We're done with this. The fact that the House and Senate haven't done it yet is just because they write the rules.
Right.
It's as if the umpires weren't just calling the shots for the game, but also were the ones who hired all the umpires and wrote all the rules of the game. And then all of a sudden you're like, wow, these umpires are getting really rich. How did that happen?
It's not like members of Congress are going to go hungry because they can't trade stocks. And when they're out of Congress, they have all sorts of avenues for making a lot of money. This is not a this is not a financially displaced group of people. So I don't understand. Right. I would think he should be able to find a Republican co-sponsor who wants to humiliate people or wants to sort of lean into this kind of populist moment, this frustration with Wall Street and moneyed interest that animates the Republican base as well.
Who do you think it could be? Because I think it's anybody who's facing serious challenges, either in a primary or a general. Because I understand if you're ensconced in the Senate, how you can say no to that. But if you're running and you have to answer to voters, feels like a very hard question to say no to.
Yeah.
So
I don't know.
I mean, what about a Ted Cruz?
Ted Cruz or
Josh Hallway.
Mike Lee, maybe, right?
You would think a Mike Lee.
Mike Lee, maybe, yeah.
I mean, it shouldn't be that hard.
It shouldn't be that hard.
And you would think that now Elizabeth Warren has had a bill on this for a while too, that I think is even a little bit more expansive, although we haven't seen what Ossoff's is yet. But that's going to scan as a lot more kind of partisan and ideological than Ossoff coming in as the Georgia guy who, incidentally, won his race by calling his opponent corrupt.
Right, Loeffler.
David Perdue. Well, Loeffler was trading, and she lost to Warnock. But David Perdue was also just addicted to day trading.
Right.
And there'd also been some weird options that he'd gotten. And remember this amazing moment during the debate where he just said, "You're a crook."
Right.
and then he pulled out of the next debate, and it just made him look like such a beta that I think that's the thing that kind of lost the race.
And I remember conservative media loved those stories. I mean, were furious with the behavior of those two people. They covered that was a Republican scandal that got a lot of coverage on Fox News and in right-wing media because the viewers and the base were disgusted by this behavior, and they didn't get a pass for that. The right did not give them a pass for that at all.
So while the mainstream media blackballed the topic, people kept pushing. Francis Collins in April emailed Anthony Fauci a link to a segment by Bret Baier, who noted that people still wondered about that lab. Of course, one thing Collins could have done is actively explored the question and searched for truth, but by April, Fauci and Collins had settled on their story, and Fauci told him to ignore it and assured him it would all go away. Quote, "I would not do anything about this right now. It is a shiny object that will go away in times." That was not true.
Right. No, he was wrong.
It went away for a long time.
Brilliant political instincts from Dr. Fauci. No, it's that absolutely did not turn out to be the case, and partially because the evidence just, despite their best efforts, I mean, I think one of the things you pointed out is that Fauci cited that paper to tamp down on the theory,
right,
which was, of course, the point, but it is a completely corrupt process, literally manipulating scientific papers for political ends. And that Collins email that was just up, he talks about this is a destructive conspiracy theory that threatens international harmony. And so you see that their motivations are not purely scientific, as Dr. Fauci would have you believe. There are all kinds of politics. And the other thing I would note is that date, February 4th. February 4th, as you said, what changed between the 1st and the 4th? We don't know. It seems likely that nothing did. But February 4th, 2020, February 4th, 2022 is the day that the Beijing Olympics begin. So 2 years to the day, we're
International harmony.
International harmony. So I found the sort of that interesting in and of itself, because here we are. But everything you just broke down, I thought was really helpful.
And what's obnoxious about this whole conversation is how partisan it has become, and needlessly so, because there's nothing structural or fundamental about the question of where the virus originated that necessarily requires Republicans to believe one thing and Democrats to believe another thing.
Right.
Like,
what's the China question, right?
Right, but for them it was, they talk about international harmony, but I think what they mean underneath that is the harmony of their scientific research funding flows.
Yeah, the WHO, yes.
Right, Fauci was furious about the pause in gain-of-function research. Fauci knew that they had been funding this type of research through EcoHealth Alliance in Wuhan. Even at the height of this, wasn't reflecting on whether or not gain of function is something that should be paused. Mm-hmm. Like, he thinks, and he has said this publicly, that it's just misinformation, that people are confused about the value of gain of function and the wisdom of it.
and the definition of it, of course.
And so that's right. So that's the harmony, mm-hmm, and that they're really talking about. And for all of these Democrats who are concerned about who were concerned about the lab leak getting discussed, they don't have any interest in defending gain of function. Like, they weren't
right,
even thinking through, like, what's their material connection to this question. It just became a culture war question, to the point where everyone on one side just was on, believing one set of things, and then everybody on the other side was believing the other.
The media has played, I think, an absolutely shameful role in all of this as well. Granted, after a while, there was a long New York Magazine piece that came mm-hmm out talking about the lab leak theory that really got people to take it seriously again. But for the better part of a year, they were following Fauci's lead, and he was manipulating them, intentionally manipulating them. And you can see it in the emails. They're talking about media strategy. I mean, come
right
on. And they're actually, again, using papers, scientific papers, to deal with the media. And so the media's role in allowing them to get away with that for the better part of a year, and even longer, depending on what the source is, because they seemed to be anti-Trump. And Fauci had that moment for a couple of months. But even then, when he was, saying nice things about Donald Trump, everyone thought it was sort of like wink and a nod, right? Like, he was, the Trump whisperer. And so because he was against Trump, the media couldn't do its job of calling balls and strikes. And that, I think, is also what pushed everyone into their individual corners.
Right, because I would love to hear kind of impartial, scientific-minded people mm-hmm talking, grilling Fauci about this.
Absolutely.
Who just want to get to the bottom of it. I am glad that Rand Paul is pursuing it, but he can only take it so far because of who he is.
Right.
He needs somebody with scientific credibility across the board to say, no, like that, these answers are not going to fly. You can't just make this a personal war between me and you.
Well, that's, yeah, like you said, Fauci wants to make it into a dogfight. The exchange that you just played, you hear him, Rand Paul didn't say that. Fauci referred to it as a conspiracy theory, and Fauci is saying, I didn't refer to it as a conspiracy. Like he's intentionally arguing past the point. But I think sadly everybody is too sort of tarred or burdened by the partisan labels now to actually serve as a sort of neutral scientific arbiter because somehow, some way, we always find a way to not we, but the people in the media and in our politics always find a way to take sides.
Indeed.
Even before January 6th, well before January 6th, the U.S. security state, principally the FBI and the Homeland Security Department, were emphatic that the greatest threat to American national security came not from foreign threats like Al-Qaeda or ISIS or Russia or China, but from what they call domestic extremist groups, so right from American soil. So it would be bizarre, given their claim, if they weren't engaged in all kinds of infiltration efforts against the groups they regard to be domestic extremists, given that they were proclaiming those to be the greatest threat to American national security. We know for a fact that they've used tactics like infiltrators and informants, provoking people into plots throughout the first war on terror. I reported on that for a decade. We know that they did that in the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping plot, which made a big splash prior to the election, but it turns out at least half the people involved, at least half, including the leaders, were working at the behest of the FBI. And what we know about January 6th, though limited, is still significant, which is that the three groups the FBI claims were primarily responsible for organizing it, the Three Percenters, the Oath Keepers, and the Proud Boys, are all groups in which the FBI had its tentacles. And even the New York Times says that the FBI had at least one informant on the ground with whom it was communicating during the protest of January 6th. So all these questions, like how many FBI informants were in these groups and how many FBI informants or agents were on the ground participating in January 6th, are things the committee refuses to tell us, even though the questions are urgent, given what little we have been able to ascertain for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly why the Ray Epps thing is a really easy, shiny object that can distract from these broader problems, because it gets into exactly what you were talking about, Glenn. There's so many other questions here, and it allows the committee to just sort of say, look, asked and answered, another silly conspiracy theory debunked. Now, Cruz asked about Ray Epps yesterday. Epps, of course, is a suspected federal agent who was recorded telling crowds on the evening of January 6th they had to, quote, get into the Capitol tomorrow. He acted so strangely, in fact, that people began shouting "Fed" at him. On the day of January 6th, Epps was seen whispering to a man standing in front of the barricades around the Capitol. Minutes later, video shows the man Epps whispered to tearing down the barricades and storming the grounds. Cruz questioned the FBI specifically on Epps' role in all of this. Let's watch that.
Did Mr. Epps urge them to tear down the barricades?
Sir, similar to the other answers, I cannot answer that.
Shortly thereafter, the FBI put out a public post seeking information on individuals connected with violent crimes on January 6th. Among those individuals, in the bottom there, is Mr. Epps. The FBI publicly asked for information, offering cash rewards leading to information leading to the arrest. This was posted, and then, sometime later, magically, Mr. Epps disappeared from the public posting. According to public records, Mr. Epps has not been charged with anything. No one's explained why a person videoed urging people to go to the Capitol, a person whose conduct was so suspect the crowd believed he was a Fed, would magically disappear from the list of people the FBI was looking at.
And then the January 6th committee tweeted out, the select committee is aware of unsupported claims that Ray Epps was an FBI informant based on the fact that he was on the FBI wanted list and then was removed from the list without being charged. Yeah, unsupported because they won't answer any questions. I mean, listen, Glenn, if Ted Cruz, a U.S. senator, can't get questions answered from the FBI, then who can? Because I know I can't. I mean, I'm not going to be able to get those. The average person isn't going to be able to get those questions answered. If Ted Cruz can't, who can get these questions answered?
The entire purpose of the Congressional January 6th committee, we're told, is that this was such a momentous event in American history, this 3-hour riot by 1,000 Trump boomers and Gen Xers from Facebook, that we need to know everything about it, the way we needed to investigate the 9/11 attack. We need to get to the bottom of everything, have all the facts. One of the critical questions that the 9/11 Commission examined was, what role did the FBI and the other security state agencies play in the failures that led up to 9/11? Why didn't they detect that plot? What is it that they knew? What information were they in possession of in advance that they failed to use it to stop, and why? The January 6th committee seems to have zero interest in any of those questions. Like asking, well, you were saying well before the January 6th that these groups are a grave threat. Did you have informants implanted in them? And if not, why not? And if so, how did that not help you know that the January 6th riot or coup or insurrection or whatever you want to call it is coming? So there is a body that should be answering these questions. That's the body that's steadfastly refusing to look into any of this and seems to be very eager to malign any of these questions as crazy right-wing conspiracy theories.